Good morning, and thank you for joining our virtual Bringing Back Main Street Roundtable. I'm Sarah Torreson from the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And before we get started, I just want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website, h-gac.com. And before we kick it off, Andrea Tantillo will briefly go over some Zoom controls and etiquette.
So that was the first piece of etiquette. I was muted. So good morning, everyone. I just want to let you know that participant microphones need to be muted throughout the presentations. And we ask that if you're not presenting, could you please leave your cameras off? If you're on your phone, you can mute and unmute yourself using *6. And we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end, or you can type your questions and comments for the speakers, for H-GAC staff, or for each other in the chat throughout the presentations. Sarah, back to you.
Thank you very much. So we'll be hearing from 3 speakers today about the Community Development Block Grant programs. And there have been many examples of success stories in our region, and we're excited to share among peers today. And then after that, we'll also hear about a new resource, a toolbox for community and economic development that H-GAC will be launching. But before we get into this agenda for today, we'd like to get a sense of who is in our audience. So if you would please respond to the poll that should be popping up on your screen. We'd like to know which best describes your role at this event. Are you an elected official, city or county government staff, state or federal government staff, private industry staff, educational institute staff, nonprofit volunteer or staff, a student, an interested resident, H-GAC staff, or other? And we'll give everyone a couple seconds to think about it, answer the poll. All right, just 5 more seconds. Great. So thank you so much, everyone. I'll share the results quickly so you can see who's here. It looks like we have good representation from city and county government staff, some elected officials, private industry staff, nonprofits. So great. I think it'll be a good discussion today. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today. Crystal Ortegon is a program specialist for the Texas Department of Agriculture's Texas Community Development Block Grant Program. And she has served the program for 2 years and works extensively with the downtown revitalization and the community development funds. So Crystal, if you'd like to take control of the screen, and we look forward to hearing from you today.
Yes, hello, thank you, Sarah. I will go ahead and share my screen now. Hi, good morning, everyone. Like Sarah said, my name is Crystal Ortegon. I am a program specialist for the Department of Agriculture. Specifically, I work with our Texas Community Development Block Grant programs. I'm excited to be here with you all this morning and share more about our programs, especially highlighting those programs that you can use for your downtown and Main Street areas. So I will go ahead and get started. So this morning we will talk about our Texas CDBG program as a whole, our overview. Then we'll go deeper into our programs. And we will also include at the end 2021 application tips and updates. Now is actually a great time that we're talking about our programs with H-GAC, as our CD and downtown revitalization programs will be accepting applications very soon. So just a background about us here at the CDBG, Texas CDBG program. TDA receives our funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Our funding is intended for smaller communities, or in HUD terms, non-entitlement areas, which here in Texas are predominantly rural in nature. Often cities with populations under 50K and counties with a non-metro population under 200K are considered non-entitlement and are therefore eligible for our program. Our program serves 861 cities and 244 counties. I just really like sharing those numbers because it really gives a feel for how big the state of Texas is. So as I mentioned, entitlement and non-entitlement, this is a map of the state of Texas broken down, color-coded into those non-entitlement and entitlement areas. As you can see, the H-GAC area, which is circled in black here, does have some entitlement cities and counties. If you're here today from an entitlement community, or if you're not sure if you're considered an entitlement city or county, I encourage you to check out the HUD website via the link on this slide. On this website, you'll be able to find a list of entitlement areas. For those communities that are listed on entitlement, you'll find yourself on this website, and you'll also be able to find your local CDBG program contacts. While TDA does not administer funding for those entitlement areas, I do just want to encourage people to look on the website, see what contacts are listed, and reach out if you think you have a project that you would like to propose. You never know when your projects could align with the local CDBG program priorities. For those communities that are not entitlement, you are eligible for our fund categories, and those fund categories that apply to the H-GAC region would be our Community Development Fund, our Downtown Revitalization Program, State Urgent Need, Planning and Capacity Building, and our Fire, Ambulance, and Service Truck Fund. I do want to talk specifically today around our Community Development and Downtown Revitalization Program, since these are programs that you can apply to specific areas such as a downtown, or in the case of CD, you can apply it to your entire community, to your entire city. Before I jump into those programs, I do want to point out a common thread that brings all of our programs together, and that is our national program objectives, or the national program objectives from the Housing and Urban Development. So those programs are something that, those objectives are something that every CDBG project within every fund category must meet at least one of these NPOs, as we call them, designated by HUD. These are the benefit to low to moderate income persons, elimination of slum and blight conditions, or urgent need. So for example, our CD, Community Development Fund, addresses the NPO of benefiting low to moderate income persons, whereas DRP addresses the elimination of slum and blight conditions, and our SUN Fund would address urgent needs of a community. So with that in mind, we can dive into talking about the Downtown Revitalization Program. I do want to point out briefly that in previous years, this program was officially called the Downtown Revitalization Main Street Program. This year, the name has been updated to Downtown Revitalization Program, but it still does include a Main Street component. So those communities that are main streets will be scored with a different criteria, but it's a very much parallel criteria. So if anyone is joining us from a certified Main Street community, this information applies equally to you. So the DRP program is a grant opportunity for up to $350,000 in funding for public infrastructure activities that will address slum and blight conditions within the community's downtown area, or again, a designated Main Street area if you're a Main Street community. This is an annual program and the applications for the 2021 cycle will be accepted until May 3rd. So what exactly does slum and blight conditions mean? For the DRP program, a community may consider an area as slum and blight if the area is detrimental to public health, safety, morals, welfare, because that area has a predominance of buildings or other improvements that are dilapidated, deteriorated, or obsolete due to age or other reasons. I'll share some photos of example conditions with you shortly. But before I do that, I also want to clarify what exactly we mean by a downtown area. This year, TDA has clarified the criteria to provide better technical assistance on what it means to be a downtown area. So how we, for the sake of the DRP program, see a downtown district, we will typically meet the following criteria. The city the downtown area will be the city's historic area of commerce or the economic center of the city, maybe the area around the courthouse or city square, or it can be the retail area of the community that does not include single family dwellings. One tip I'd like to include as we have this in mind is if you submit an application, on one of the maps that's submitted, I would recommend including the businesses that will be served by these proposed improvements. That helps us to, in a snapshot as we're reviewing applications, really see the retail nature of the downtown area. So the slum and blight conditions and a downtown area are determined by the community and will be officially designated via a local resolution. The local resolution will also note project activities and how they will eliminate the current slum and blight conditions. This local resolution is a required part of the application and is very important. Specifically, this is how we at TDA can ensure we're meeting HUDs and POs, like I talked about earlier, of eliminating slum and blight. Our application guide, which is published on our website, has a sample slum and blight designation resolution. Please feel free to follow this format closely and ensure that you meet all the requirements should you be submitting an application this year. In my experience, it's just very hard when a community is disqualified because the slum and blight resolution is lacking in one of these needed components. So as I promised, here are some pictures. Here we have a few slides of downtown Navasota. They applied for a DRP award in 2011. And these photos illustrate the conditions that the city intended to improve. This area is about about 1 block away from the city's town hall. As you can see, these buildings are characteristic of dilapidated and deteriorated, which is one of the criteria previously mentioned for slum and blight conditions. Here is an example of non-ADA compliant sidewalks that contribute to unsafe pedestrian walkways. And here are some after photos addressing the sidewalk deterioration, including ramps and handrails, which that brings us to what activities are eligible. So TxCDBG funds in the DRP program can be used to make the following improvements in a community's designated downtown and Main Street area. That includes sidewalks, lighting, eliminating architectural barriers for the disabled, water and sewer, road construction, natural gas lines, electric power lines, utilities. Grant administration and engineering services can also be covered with TxCDBG funds. However, please do note that those are capped at 16% for grant administration and 25% for engineering services. Another activity can be demolition or clearance activity of non-residential structures. So having all of the eligible activities in mind, I wanted to give an example of a multiple activity project. This example is from the City of Cleveland. They applied for a 2018 DRP award. And here the city is proposing to update, as we can see on their map here, they're proposing to update sidewalk, water lines, and storm drainage improvements. I share this example because a key to doing a multiple activity project successfully is by ensuring every activity meets the national program objective of eliminating slum and blight. So in this example, the application slum and blight resolution would address the current slum and blight conditions of the sidewalks, of the water lines, and the storm drainage systems and or lack thereof, in this case of the storm drainage system. In addition, the resolution would state how these improvements would eliminate slum and blight in the area. So if we're improving the sidewalk and the water lines and the drainage systems, we want to also see in the resolution how exactly those conditions will be improved. So let's review some photos for a closer look. Here is a before photo from the City of Cleveland. We can see the sidewalk conditions are deteriorated. Here's some additional sidewalks right in front of, as we can tell, commercial properties. And here is a close-up of the lack of ADA accessibility to get up onto these sidewalks. And here we can see the city's need to improve storm drainage infrastructure. They have some pooling right there by the side of the road. And here are some after photos of the City of Cleveland. We can see these are ADA accessible sidewalks. We can see that they added in some ADA ramps and some crosswalks here at this key intersection for their downtown area. Here's examples of more sidewalks. And I do also want to point out, I believe that this pole structure here might be some lighting. So lighting, again, is an eligible activity. One thing I do want to touch on as well is we often see the desire for addition of landscape. So landscaping is not something that can be covered with TxCDBG funds. However, a community could cover landscape costs with their matching commitment. So a matching commitment is required for a community to apply. And we essentially see that as the community puts in some percentage of money to back the program on the local level as well. And that percentage of money, it can be what the community needs, but we do have a scoring criteria for match funding. So I will continue with some more photos. Here is also some intersections of the new sidewalk. And we can see again, these new sidewalks are really benefiting the retail space here in this community. All right, great. Well, now I will move on to our CD program. This is our Community Development Fund. The Community Development Fund is the largest fund category within our program. Many different activities are eligible. Those activities must principally benefit low to moderate income persons. And we do find that most of the activities are funding for public facilities such as water, wastewater infrastructure, street and drainage improvements, and housing activities. This fund is available on a biennial basis for for funding, applications are taken every 2 years and ranked every 2 years. And an important note about the CDBG program is that it is funding through a competition in each of the 24 state planning regions. So H-GAC or H-GAC is their own planning region. So we consider all H-GAC applications together. And also the application deadline for CD this year is May 3rd. So the NPO for the CD fund is benefit to low to moderate income individuals, which HUD defines as those whose income is 80% or less of the area median family income. So if you're looking into applying for the program, a clear documentation of an applicant's beneficiary identification method is needed to be received with the application. And a community can provide this documentation by either the use of HUD's low to moderate income survey data or the use of door-to-door surveys. So for HUD's LMISD, this method may be used to document beneficiaries within a specific census geography. So that can include place, such as county, city, or census tracts or block groups. And the use of door-to-door surveys is ideal for communities, for projects that have a smaller benefit area. And I'll go over some project examples that will include samples of when which method was used. Oh, and it looks like on this slide, my image did not transfer over, but essentially, oh, there it is. Okay, I forgot I had added an animation to that. So I wanted to point out here that this beneficiary documentation that I'm mentioning, all of our guidance for this is available on our website. So we can see here on the bottom arrow that our 2020 LMISD data is there, as well as at the top, we have our survey tabulation form, as well as our survey methodology manual. So that brings us to what activities are eligible. So eligible activities and improvements included are those listed and more. All eligible activities can be found on the application guide, which is also published online. Specifically on page 31, we have a nice rubric that breaks out all of the eligible activities. I do want to point out here, since we are in the H-GAC world this morning, that in our CD fund, H-GAC project priorities includes those that are bracketed here. So that includes water improvements, wastewater improvements, street improvements, flood and drainage improvements, and housing rehabilitation. So let's look at an example of a target area benefit from the city of Anahuac. In this case, the city is experiencing significant inflow and infiltration of stormwater into their sanitary sewer system. This was an issue, particularly in the areas of the community with older lines. And I wanted to also show this example, as this is a great project map. They provided a very clear delineation of their census blocks, and they also very clearly showed which properties were affected, and they show where exactly those proposed sewer line improvements and proposed manholes will be located. This is an example, as I was talking earlier, because the area to be impacted beneficially by the sewer improvements is smaller than this census block group. In this case, it makes sense that the use of door-to-door survey was used to document LMI beneficiaries. So what the city would have submitted to us here at TDA would have been each of their individual door-to-door survey questionnaires, as well as the survey tabulation form. Both of these will need to be submitted to provide that proof of meeting the NPO. And again, these documents are found on our website, as well as the survey methodology manual, which I highly recommend reading should the use of door-to-door surveys be used. So here's another citywide project example, the city of Willis. Here we had a proposed water storage tank. And in this case, because the water storage tank serves the entire city, HUD's LMISD data is used. So what exactly it looks like that they submitted to us would have been a printout of their data on the LMISD spreadsheet. So here we can see their LMISD data provided by HUD is right at 77.6%. In addition, I also want to point out that it might seem fairly obvious when a project benefits the entire city, but Table 2 is a great place to fill out and provide a justification for the project service area. And that Table 2 is a page within the application. So in this example, a justification might look something like the existing water storage tank at water plant number 3 is the largest source of water storage and helps maintain pressure throughout the city of Willis's water system. So I also wanted to share with you this morning a few different projects from the city of Kingsville. They are not in the H-GAC region, but I think this community has done a really great job of taking advantage of the programs given the community needs and their projects. So in this city, they have had 3 different awards over the span of a few years, from projects ranging to citywide to their downtown area. So in this project map pictured here, this is a proposed CD grant for the improvement of manholes. The city was having some issues with inflow and infiltration, so they wanted to improve manholes citywide. And I believe in this map here, their downtown area is around those 11, 12, and 13 labeled manholes. So here is an outline of the city's Main Street district. Very clearly labeled map. And here is an example of one of the maps from their 2018 downtown project, where the city received funding for sidewalk improvements alongside Kleberg Avenue. So this was a 2018 project for our DRP Main Street program. And here, last year, they continued off of the 2018 project and improved sidewalks on 7th Street between Kleberg and Yoakum Avenue. The main point I want to share here is that in both the DRP and CD programs, we do take into account previous funding for scoring. However, I just want to stress, don't let the points keep you from applying. If you have an eligible project, submit it. You might be able to keep building off of your projects as the City of Kingsville has. And that brings us into our State and Urgent Need Fund. I'll talk briefly about this program as well as our Planning and Capacity and FAST Fund. So the Texas CDBG program provides funding for disaster relief assistance for eligible counties and cities in state declared disasters. These SUN funds can be used for the repair and restoration and improvement of damaged infrastructure. There is a priority for safe drinking water and debris removal. This SUN program accepts applications as needed per disaster declaration and is on a first come, first served basis. So here are some examples of needed improvements of roadways after severe storms that were declared disasters, as well as debris removal that is in front of City Hall. I believe this is a community in the East Texas area that their City Hall was hit pretty hard with some debris. All right, our Planning and Capacity Building Fund. This fund is a smaller program, but provides much needed funds for cities and counties to conduct planning activities that assess local needs, develop strategies to address local needs, and build or improve local capacity. The tangible results from this program are the creation of detailed planning maps. And last but not least, I will touch on our Fire, Ambulance, and Service Truck Fund. The FAST Fund provides funding for eligible vehicles to provide emergency response and special services to rural communities of low to moderate income. FAST is financed by return deobligated funds. Due to this, it is not known how much funding will or can be provided. It varies cycle to cycle, year to year. But communities interested in this program, I'd encourage you to keep an eye on our website and subscribe to our listserv for the latest updates with our FAST program. So that is all of our programs in a nutshell. I also want to take some time to talk about a few application tips and next steps to help you get an idea of where to start in the application process. I'll be here speaking specifically to DRP and CD as these applications are coming soon and are due on May 3rd. So here are some overview application tips. I mentioned earlier in the example with Willis, but it's important to include service area and benefit area justification. So tell us exactly why a certain area benefits from a proposed improvement in your application. Really help us to really connect all of the dots for us. Whenever something is not clear, that will result in the staff reaching out, and it will just make the application review easier to have everything connected for us. Another application tip is to include project and activities in the community needs assessment. And that community needs assessment is a portion of the application. In this section of the application, you can list out all of the community needs that you have. List out really everything that the community needs. Don't limit it to just what's included in the proposal, but be sure the proposal is listed in those needs. If upsizing or downsizing infrastructure, include an explanation in the application. So for example, if water lines need to be added, or if they need to increase in diameter, tell us why. Also ensure the correct National Program Objective support documentation is included. So again, for DRP, that's the Slum and Blight resolution, which addresses conditions and activities to improve those slum and blight conditions. And for CD, that's LMI and service benefit area justification. And also Another application tip is follow suggested steps and timeline. So those steps and timelines are laid out in the application guides, but I'll also review that here with you. So application steps. First, get started on the procurement process of an application preparer or grant administrator and application engineering services. Both vendors are essential in the project development process. Secondly, begin citizen participation activities. Schedule public hearings to receive input from the community and stakeholders, and begin brainstorming fair housing activities to undertake. Points will be received for applicants that conduct the required public hearing at least 90 days prior to the application deadline. So get started now to ensure citizen participation. Thirdly, once an app preparer and engineer have been hired, begin discussing public feedback received and feasible projects that will meet stated community needs. And fourth, with the assistance of the application preparer or application engineer, identify your benefit area, cost estimates, low to moderate income beneficiaries, and begin collecting beneficiary data. So if you need door-to-door surveys or if you're using LMISD, determine which method you will be using. So a little bit more about the procurement of professional services. Communities must procure application preparers and engineers before the providers conduct any work to prepare the application for CDBG funding. The sooner that your community awards a service contract for needed professional services, the quicker that you can begin working to develop your project and application. All CDBG applications are a significant coordination effort and have public consultation requirements, so be sure to allow your vendors ample time for this during the application period. For more details, be sure to check out our training page and view where you can also find a recorded webinar about the procurement process. And I do want to also take this time to share that for our 2021 cycle, we are doing something exciting here at TDA. I'm happy to announce that we will have our TDA-GO system, which is our new online grant management system. TDA-GO will be the platform for our 2021 application submissions. Training for the system is actually being held later this afternoon at 1 p.m. So if your community is looking to apply and hasn't already heard of this training, please go to our website and take a look. And lastly, I want to just give another friendly reminder about our application deadlines. Our CD and DRP programs will have application deadlines of May 3rd. The official timestamp needed for it to be eligible is May 3rd, received by 11:59 p.m. Technical assistance from TDA staff, however, will cease at 5 p.m. on May 3rd. And again, if you have an eligible application, please apply. Don't let low scoring keep you from applying. Many low scoring applications have successfully received funding in the past. And lastly, just stay tuned for updates on programs, including FAST and PCB, by joining our listserv. And I believe we are taking questions at the end, so I will turn at the end of all of the presenters. I think that's correct. I will go ahead and turn it back over to Sarah. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. I hope to see some applications come in from H-GAC for both our CD and DRP programs.
Thank you very much, Crystal. And that was a great overview and especially useful to have those application tips for the upcoming funding cycle. And like you said, I'll add a quick reminder to put any questions you already have in the chat box now. and we'll come back to all of those after our next two presentations. So next we'll hear from Leah Larkins with the City of Huntsville. So if Leah, if you're able to share your screen. Yeah, there we go. Great.
Okay, so I am actually working two screens right now with our camera and microphone capabilities. So here I have my phone where you're hearing my audio and seeing my face. And then I'm sharing a screen through the Huntsville screen user that you might be able to see in your grid view. So let's give that a shot. And okay, are we able to see my screen, my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay,
oh,
wonderful.
Now we can see it again.
Okay, I'll move this over here. So I'm here today to talk about Huntsville's use of CDBG funds, and specifically our project to update our transportation master plan, which was adopted in August of 2019. So we've had a little over a year with it now. Okay, make sure you can see the whole thing. And I'm going to, this presentation includes three of our funding mechanisms. It includes the CDBG, but it also includes some information about our Main Street program and our TERS district. So just focusing on the CDBG funds, we applied for a grant of $50,000, and that was awarded by Texas CDBG, and then the city council considered and adopted a resolution to allow $100,000 to accompany that $50,000 and engage a consulting firm to update our transportation master plan. In Huntsville, we have used CDBG funds for that TMP, but also for crosswalks and lighting. Huntsville is underneath that, we're below that 50,000 population mark, and also we meet criteria for moderate to low income persons. The transportation master plan, like I said, we've had a little over a year with this document. And so, especially with COVID and the challenges associated with moving some of our services to remote and, really putting a halt to many of our coordinative efforts, especially in the first part of 2020. Even though it was adopted in 2019, we're still kind of getting our feet under us as far as deciding which projects to pursue. As of right now, the most wonderful and helpful thing to come from the Transportation Master Plan update have been the items that are identified on the slide. So they identified corridors of focus, like many rural communities in Texas. Our primary corridors are maintained by TxDOT. We have I-45, we have State Highway 19, we have State Highway 30 that really constitute the arteries of our community. And these corridors of focus, they're mentioned in our comprehensive plan, a separate document, and we don't have very strict zoning regulations in Huntsville. Zoning is still kind of a bad word, but the comprehensive plan does empower officials to make certain decisions and development requirements based on these primary corridors. So to have those specifically identified, what those corridors are in our TMP, and to give specific recommendations for those corridors, it further empowers our officials and staff to pursue projects and pursue development that is compliant with what is in our plans. So it gave a name to something that everyone was already kind of talking about. It identified short, medium, and long-term projects, especially important because we have some really wonderful, dedicated council members and elected and appointed officials who really want the best for Huntsville, and they're active in the community and they're excited about projects, but sometimes we have these pie in the sky projects or these things that you would really love to see. So again, it was great to have an outside professional firm look at the data, look at the modeling, and communicate in language that is meaningful and understandable what is accomplishable for communities of our size and our resources. It identified the transportation radii for local schools. I put this in here because Huntsville is a somewhat compact community, especially the area around our downtown and the university, and our schools are in many cases in the middle of neighborhoods, very much community schools. And so by identifying these transportation radii, and what I mean is they produced graphics that showed, what are the properties within half a mile, within a quarter mile, within 2 miles, because those distances are important for safe routes to school funding, for getting an understanding of what's walkable, what's bikeable, and what properties are served by bus routes. So again, an important resource for exploring funding opportunities and exploring projects that will have the most impact. And then finally, it identified alternative transportation needs, specifically pedestrian and biking needs. We have a bit of a visibility issue in Huntsville where we have the university, we have these community schools, we have residential uses occurring near our downtown. And so you have folks who are walking and biking, whether they're university students or people just getting where they need to go, but that's occurring during the day when many of our auto users are at work. So they're not necessarily seeing that pedestrian or bike infrastructure being used or that there's a need for it to be constructed. So identifying it in this plan, got it in front of everyone and got that data to show that there really is a need for improved alternative transportation infrastructure in our city. I included some pictures here just to show this is a photo from our transportation master plan. You can see some not so great or non-existent pedestrian infrastructure. There's no identified crosswalk. There's no signalized crosswalk here. There is going in the other direction. And you've got 4 lanes of traffic on a TxDOT maintained state highway right next to your students walking to school. I also included this one. I'm betting there are other folks who are listening in who have seen this in their community or in other rural communities in Texas. Here we have a TxDOT maintained road that appears to be somewhat recently resurfaced. We've got modern traffic signaling poles, and then you can see where some parts of the sidewalk have also been replaced. So this is not a stretch of road that's just been left. Someone is performing work there, but you've got these traffic signal and light poles that are right in the middle of your sidewalk and obviously have made the sidewalk non-ADA compliant if it ever was. So there is room for improvement. Again, getting these images in front of our officials so that you make it easy for them to say yes to these projects. And then this is the final photo that I included. This is that school. This is our proposed bike network, but it shows where our schools are located. It shows those transportation radii. So you see the orange dots show the locations of our elementary schools and middle schools, and then gives you the distance from those schools. So you can see, the solid line closest to the dot, that's the quarter-mile radius. That's accepted as the walkable radius. And we have quite a few of those. We have some that are already touching. with our established institutions. So again, gathering that data through this TMP process to get it in front of our decision makers and to make it easy for them to say yes and to pursue projects that are going to have the most impact. I know this roundtable is not really focusing on Main Street. We do have a Main Street coordinator. I can talk more about that if anyone has questions, or if you want to reach out after the workshop. And then the same with the TERS. So just feel free to shoot me an email or call me. I love talking about this stuff, and I can give you hopefully just some insight into Huntsville's experience with specifically the TERS. And that's all I have today.
Thank you very much, Leah. It's great to hear about the transportation master plan. It's also a great example of a way to use TxCDBG funds, possibly in combination with other funding sources. So thank you for sharing. I'm sure we'll have questions for you later. Put any questions you have right now in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute when we have our Q&A later and discuss with our speakers. So next, we're going to hear from a different success story from Melissa Landine with the City of Eagle Lake. Melissa is the city manager in Eagle Lake and has experience with CDBG programs in both Eagle Lake and also from a past experience in Falfurrias, Texas. So Melissa, are you able to take over screen share?
Yes, good morning. Let me take care of that right now. See, oh, I did it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Melissa Landine, and I am the city manager for the City of Eagle Lake, Texas. Joining me on the call and listening in is the Eagle Lake Mayor, Mayor Mary Parr. She is on her 5th two-year term, and I'd like to welcome her and during this presentation and commend her for her continued support over the years in our many grant applications and successful use of CDBG funds. So generally when someone asks me to present, I like to take advantage of a few minutes just to talk about the community I'm a part of. The City of Eagle Lake is a small community located just southeast of, located in southeast Colorado County off US Highway 90A and about 60 miles west of Houston, 140 miles east of San Antonio and 100 miles southeast of Austin. The highways that serve our community are a very busy US 90A. We generally see about 10,000 vehicles a day pass through here, and Texas FM 102, Farm to Market Road 3013 and Farm to Market Road 1093, and 12 miles to the north is I-10. Eagle Lake has an estimated population of about 3,739 residents, and we're about 2.79 square miles, and much of it consists of water. We do have a very large privately owned lake with some access for the general public through our municipal park. Rice is the major crop for our area, but we do have cotton, grains, and cattle production that are significant to the economy. We also have hunting and ecotourism, which is quite a dichotomy. We have people who come to Eagle Lake specifically to visit the Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge or our municipal park. To catch a glimpse or a photo of the more than 286 bird species here, everything from the osprey to the yellow-bellied flycatcher, hawks, and woodpeckers. But then we also have people who travel here from all over the US, specifically to hunt teal, pintail, and a variety of ducks. So that's very interesting to me, but as long as it draws people here, I think that's great. We have sand and gravel mines around Eagle Lake that supply materials for construction. for our area and a large part of Southeast Texas. Like I mentioned earlier, about 10,000 commercial trucks drive through Eagle Lake on a daily basis. We have dozens of historical markers in Eagle Lake. Our downtown commercial district is on the National Register, and we have numerous homes and parks and other areas around Eagle Lake that are quite noteworthy in our history books. I like to include this Facebook post because it generally, it really represents that we are a rural community, very unique in Texas. And as you can see, this is just outside our City Hall offices and driving through downtown. Moving through historic downtown Eagle Lake, Texas, some of the sights and sounds of Texas are utterly legendary. So oftentimes from my office, I can hear cows mooing as they travel through town, and I run out and catch a picture. I think that's pretty cool. Our use of CDBG funds is outside the downtown Main Street realm, although we will be pursuing funds for our downtown. But some of the things that were discussed earlier are other uses for CDBG funds. And our uses here in Eagle Lake have been quite successful for the improvements of our water and sewer systems. The city of Eagle Lake has one wastewater treatment plant, 4 lift stations, a collection system with about 337 sanitary sewer manholes of different sizes and made of different materials, 169,500 linear feet of sanitary sewer lines in the collection system. And our treatment plant is permitted on an average daily flow of 0.75 million gallons per day and permitted 2-hour peak flow of 2.25 million gallons per day. During Hurricane Harvey, the city received quite a bit of rain over a 4-day span from August 26th through the 29th in 2017, as did many communities in our area. And it truly put a strain on our wastewater treatment plant and our water systems, with a peak effluent flow between 2.5 to 2.75 million gallons per day. So if you go back, you could see what we were permitted on a daily average through TCEQ at 0.7 million gallons per day, at a peak of 2.25 million gallons per day over a 2-hour period. We were way above that during Hurricane Harvey. The city was subjected to TCEQ noncompliance due to the flow exceeding the permitted 2.25 million gallons per day. Flows didn't return back to normal until the end of the month in 2017. The issues that the city identified consisted of significant I&I issues throughout the collection system, inflow and infiltration. Our sanitary sewer collection system was inundated with floodwaters in the city's floodplain areas. We had excessive flows from stormwater that significantly damaged manholes in these areas, and disruption to the pumping station and the wastewater treatment operations. Other issues that were identified as a result of the heavy rains from Hurricane Harvey were brick manholes that are typically found in older systems. So when addressing some of the floodwater issues, we were able to determine that many of the issues that put a strain on our system were due to our manholes being constructed, the way they used to many years ago. They were still made of materials of brick. Manhole surcharging included cracks and debris, roots, cracks at the joints or walls can contribute to the system I&I and place undue stress on the lift stations and the wastewater treatment plant. And that's exactly what happened with Hurricane Harvey. So the city worked with GrantWorks to begin the application process for CDBG funds, particularly through the Harvey Disaster Recovery Program. And we advertised that we had planned to apply for this application in April of 2019. The focus of the grant application included 43 identified manholes in the 100-year floodplain that generally experiences high flood conditions. And our goal was to rehabilitate the brick manholes, the covers, the frames, the chimney and barrel rehab, and raising the manhole rim elevations, and including installation of inflow preventers, which help to eliminate the sheet flow of the rainwater into the sanitary sewer system, which puts a strain on the system itself. This is a map of the manholes that were identified. As you can see, they're generally all located in one location of the city. And that location is in a floodplain, predominantly very low income, Black and Hispanic community. So anytime it would rain and as Hurricane Harvey rolled in, it caused some significant flooding in that area. And those manholes were identified to contribute to the strain on our sewer system and the flooding in that area. This is a list of the identified manholes and the type of work that was done in those areas. Here is a schematic of the Hurricane Recovery Project, which shows the rehab work done on the manholes that were identified. This is a recent picture with our Public Works Director, Mike Bayette, and our engineer and contractor, HR Green and Cruise Tech. The grant application was submitted with the assistance of GrantWorks in May of 2019. In December of 2019, we received notification of the award. We worked on the contract documents, engineer identification, contractor, and the work began on November 2020. So as you can see, it's a lengthy process, but it's well worth it. We did have some modifications to the scope of the work. We did identify some manholes as we were beginning the project that were not on the list. So making some adjustments to the scope of work to perform the work on the manholes that needed the work the most. We went through a walkthrough a couple of weeks ago so we could move forward with substantial completion of the project. And on the City Council agenda for tonight's meeting is for the council to improve the certificate of substantial completion. In October of 2020, the city received notification of another CDBG grant award through the Texas Department of Agriculture for some much needed sewer improvements in another part of the city. So we're excited to get started with that. We're currently working on the contract documents. And again, it's another process, but well worth the wait. Before I came to the city of Eagle Lake, I've been with the city of Eagle Lake going on 8 months, but prior to coming here, I was with the city of Valfurias, Texas in Brooks County, just south of Corpus Christi. And I did have some experience there as well with a community development block grant program through TDA in support of downtown revitalization. And we had some much needed sidewalk improvements to allow for ADA compliance and accessibility in the downtown area. That grant award amount was in the amount of $250,000. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions at the end when we have our Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic overview of Eagle Lake's identified need and application process, and best of luck on your next application. We'll now open it up for questions from the audience. I know we've gotten a couple questions in the chat so far, so we'll go through those. Please add more questions. We're hoping to have a good discussion here. And if you would like to ask a question live, you can use the raise your hand function, and Andrea or I will see you and call on you. So I'll just go to the chat quickly. The first question we have is, do any of these programs support comprehensive master plans? So I think that one's for Crystal.
Hi, yes. So yes, master planning, that would be eligible and exactly what our planning and capacity building fund does. I do want to say though, off the top of my head, I do not know when our next cycle for the planning and capacity building will open up. I want to say my team lead, Aubrienne, I don't know if she's on the line here. She might have a better idea of when exactly that cycle opens up. But if not, definitely I encourage everybody to keep an eye on our website and to subscribe to our listserv. I can share a link to that listserv with you all. So that way, let me go ahead and share that in the chat.
That would be great. Thank you.
It's Aubrey Ann. This is Aubrey Ann Gilmore with the Texas Department of Agriculture, and Crystal and I work on the same team. Currently, as of right now, we do not have a set date for our planning capacity building. We're actually wrapping up our 2020 awards right now. So we're looking forward to accepting new applications within our program year, but we don't have one yet set. So like Crystal mentioned, our listserv is a great resource. And we're also excited about moving forward into the 21st century. We have an online application and grant management system platform. So we're actually going to be launching that later this afternoon. So we're excited to see those applications come in online and hopefully a little bit easier accessible for everyone. So that's our plug.
And Crystal, will you share that listserv information in the chat, or we also can send in our follow-up email to everyone information about that as well?
Okay, yes, I will send that to the chat. I think I accidentally just directly sent it to Andrea, so let me send that to everyone.
Great. Thank you. Okay, our next question is also for Crystal. Do most entities procure an application preparer? I assume most entities do, as they have a small staff.
So yeah, that's a good question. You know, I would say the answer is yes. We do tend to see a lot of communities procure the grant administrator to help them with the application and all of the process. But that doesn't mean that self-prepared isn't something that's doable. Communities can also self-prepare an application, but I would just recommend that cities ensure they have the manpower to do that.
Great, thank you.
That a little bit for the City of Huntsville. So when we applied for the CDBG funds for the TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, we did have a preparer on staff. It was a position, the person was the, I think, Director of Neighborhood Programs. So they had been acting that position. They did grant work, they did some Main Street stuff, they did economic development, and they'd been here for a really long time. So they were very comfortable with that process. And then they actually ended up vacating the position while after the funds had been awarded. So we're totally neck deep in this process. And they retired. And so we still had these reporting requirements. We still had to have a certified administrator to sign off on the release of the funds. And when that was something that was really unpredicted. And we didn't have anyone else on staff who really had the time to do it or who was a certified administrator for the grant. So we did contract out to find someone to help to just finish out the process that had already been started. So now Huntsville does have a grants manager. They've filled that position, and she is fantastic, absolutely wonderful. We only have one of her, and she spends, of course, so much of her time is spent on police and fire specifically. So I could see us still hiring a preparer in the future. Maybe not, depending on our grants manager's workload. But just to give you some idea of what Huntsville's experience was, that we did have that person leave. And I will also plug that when that happened, I was actually kind of lined up. I went to the training to become a certified administrator. I went to Austin, went to the training hosted by Texas Department of Agriculture, and would really recommend that, even if you don't foresee yourself ever acting as that certified administrator. It gave me such an insight into the program. You meet staff face to face, the people who are scoring your application. And I just got so much information about this project. So now these funds, or this mechanism, is always on my mind as a planner, because I got that inside look at what they're looking for and what type of projects they want to fund. And the last thing that I'll say is the impression that I got from that 2-day training, which was free. I just had to pay for my accommodation in Austin. What I really got from that training is that the folks at the Texas Department of Agriculture who work in this program, I'm sure Crystal included, they want to award this money. They want community development to happen and positive change to happen in these communities. They're not trying to trick you, or you can be pretty nervous when you're submitting an application, or feel like, oh, we're not going to get it. But they are there as a really excellent resource during that process. So don't be afraid to contact them.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's a great point to emphasize. We have another question. How much funding is being allocated to the downtown revitalization program this year?
So, hi, this is Crystal. As far as allocation, I might have to rely on Aubrianne here. I don't know off the top of my head. Aubrianne, would you have any insights on allocation?
Hey there. So caught me off guard. I don't know the exact figure offhand, but I do know that the previous fund cycle, the awards that are actually going out right now, are part of a big push where we had some extra unexpected funding. We won't anticipate that level of funding. I want to say it was close to 15 million this past year. I anticipate it'll probably back down to 10 or less. And there, Crystal likely already mentioned, but our award amounts were 500,000 last year, and they're now 350 or less. So I think we'll see probably a similar amount of projects be funded, but for that lesser amount.
Hi, everybody. I think that we may have just lost Sarah, so I will carry on with the questions for us. This question is for Leah. How do you update or educate new council members on the transportation plan or keep implementation going?
Sure. So we, the number one thing, we just talk about it all the time. So anytime we have a project that goes or development case or zoning case or plat that goes in front of them, they're going to get some background. They're going to hear about the TMP. When they are elected to council, they do get an orientation where they're given printed copies of our comp plan, our zoning ordinance, and the TMP. And we really try to foster a culture of council asking questions, going through the proper channels. So typically they would ask the city manager, who would task staff with providing a response, but being open to discussing that whenever, and kind of having open door to when those questions come in. Beyond that, we have strategic planning meetings at the beginning of every year, and then also the budgeting process a few months after that for the next fiscal year. So at the strategic planning meeting and preparing for that strategic planning meeting as it happens in January, we just had ours, staff would bring transportation items or projects to council to discuss. They ask us questions at that time about the TMP. So I guess the short answer is the orientation is left to the city secretary and the city manager, but we are here to answer their questions. And we're also, because we are the staff on the ground in the development meetings and with when we're getting these questions for improvements that need to be made, we really stay on top of it to document when we're getting, repeated questions or repeated contact from members of the public with concerns about certain, maybe areas of town or streets that really need attention, and making sure that that information is passed to the appropriate people. I guess, I don't know. Yeah, so it would be structured orientation, annual strategic planning. We don't want it to sit on the shelf.
Thank you. I see that Sarah may have returned. Do you want to take over? You want me to keep asking the questions for you?
Thanks, Andrea. I should be back now. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So this next question is for Melissa. You're going for all things within the, if it didn't, did you cover the cut with the public? Melissa, oh.
Can you hear me okay? I can hear you kind of choppy.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the city has about 327 manholes. This project that I just presented on consisted of initially 43 identified manholes in floodplain area known as the flats. And it was narrowed down to 38 manholes. So it didn't cover all of the manholes in the city. So if it didn't, how did you cover that with the public? I don't quite understand that question. Ms. Cheryl, can you elaborate on the question?
Yes. Hi, this is Cheryl Murgo with H-GAC. I was just curious, the people who didn't have the work in their area or their manholes addressed, were they upset that their neighborhood wasn't getting upgraded in the same manner? Just curious.
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard anything here recently. The project did start while I was here. When the manholes were identified previously, I was not here at that time. But in working with the contractor and the engineer when the project began, I did not hear any feedback from the public. I don't know, Mayor, are you listening in? Do you recall if we had any issues with that? I don't think she's on there. I don't believe so, Cheryl.
That's good. It sounds like you guys then, during the initial planning and applying for the application, did a good job educating the public what the grant funds were for and sort of the limitation of the funding source. Thank you.
Melissa,
Yes, thank
I'm on. This is Mayor Parr. No, that area was had been so neglected, and with all the damage that was done, the community was very receptive of those manholes being repaired for that area of our city. So there
We
was.
also had Mayor, we also had the comprehensive plan, correct, in 2012 that had community input that consisted of identifying flooding issues in that area. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. That helps.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question, and this was initially for Melissa, but I think it could be for anyone. It's can you speak about citizen engagement or citizen participation for your grants and how that process is being affected by COVID?
This is Melissa. We do, as a rural community, we don't have our own newspaper here. We have a newspaper that covers the county, and it's a weekly newspaper, so it only comes out once a week. So we do utilize social media a lot, and I'm sure our neighboring rural communities do as well. It's at no cost, and it helps to engage the community and receive feedback. And we like to update the community as the project progresses, utilizing social media. I also utilize Constant Contact, and I have an extensive list of emails from residents, community stakeholders, and organizations where we also keep them updated throughout the process.
Thank you. Leah, Crystal, do you have anything to add?
This is Leah. I have a question actually for Crystal. For where you gave us the criteria that downtown districts will typically meet, that's really helpful. Is the downtown, does that have to be zoned as downtown, or can it be, we have this area that meets these criteria that is our downtown?
Yes, so good question. Thanks, Leah. It can be, really, it is determined by the city. The city tells us essentially, we just ask that it meets those three criteria. So it doesn't have to be zoned, but we do ask that it meets those three criteria. And as far as citizen participation with COVID, I can't speak to specifics so much around any kind of guidance that TDA has offered. I am looking through some of our records, though. I believe we have submitted announcements via that listserv that I shared earlier about how communities can adapt to COVID with the citizen participation requirements. Obviously, we know that in the past, communities would have joined publicly together to talk about needs and to determine projects. We know that isn't necessarily happening now. So I believe we're accepting things being posted on websites and stuff to that extent. But I will look further into that. I want to say we have some resources that can speak specifically to that. So I will plan to look for that and send it over to H-GAC, and hopefully Sarah can send something out as a follow-up if that sounds good.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Crystal. All right, so I don't see any more questions in the chat. So if anyone else has a final question to ask, now is the time. Otherwise, we will transition to the next phase of our, oh, we have one more question in the chat. Can one organization place 2 proposals for neighboring cities? For example, I live in a growing rural community that can use improvements. However, I grew up in Houston. Sorry, I'm actually not sure the end of this question. I guess the question is, can one organization place 2 proposals for neighboring cities?
So yeah, that's a good question. If I'm understanding correctly, maybe that means either a county or a city looking at 2 different target areas, perhaps. I'm not sure. In my time with TDA, have not seen that done before, but I don't know if that necessarily means that it can't be done. I will, it looks like this is from Monique Ivory. I will look into that for you if that sounds good, Ms. Ivory, and I can follow up. But yeah, off the top of my head, I have not seen that before, so I don't necessarily have a precedent to share.
That's great. Thank you. And then last question is, have CDBG funds been used for facade improvements downtown?
So that is a good question. In the recent program history, funds have not been used in the DRP program for facade improvements. That is something that, as of now, the program is not doing, but it doesn't mean that we may not do that in the future. That's something that we have discussed for future years, but it's currently not something being done. So I would say for the 2021 cycle, no, but perhaps for the future, it's something that would be offered.
Fantastic. So next, I would like to introduce Jillian Donato, a senior planner with the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And Jillian has been working to create an economic development toolbox that lives on our webpage. And today she'll introduce the toolbox and some of the ways it can be used. So Jillian, take it away. Jillian, you're on mute.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, let me just get my screen share up. Hello, everybody. I know we are at the tail end of the session, but I am going to sort of broaden the discussion out a bit wider. And
Jillian, you're not showing the right screen. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're showing your slide preview. There you go. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry about that. You all can read my remarks. All right. So good morning, everyone. Like they said, my name is Jillian Donato, and I'm the senior planner at H-GAC, and I focus mostly on economic development programs. And today I'm going to be presenting a toolbox that was developed in collaboration with my peers as one of the implementation resources that emerged from our Livable Centers program. For those of you who may not be familiar, the Livable Centers program is fundamentally a transportation study designed to promote more walkable, live, work, play activity centers across the region. The Economic Development Toolbox emerged from an analysis of the economic development related recommendations from across the whole 10+ year collection of studies, and is presented here in its first iteration as a sort of interactive index, sort of like presenting a dictionary or a resource guide of sorts. So I'm excited to share it with you today. It's a set of strategies and tools that are really applicable to a range of small area plans, downtown and main street environments, market streets, or other mixed use zones that you all may be working on in your communities. So I want to start with just discussing how we define economic development and how different elements of it relate to one another. Depending on your organization's sources of revenue, statutes, or your organizational mandates, you may have different goals, but essentially it's about promoting growth. I'll be talking about things that can promote new development or improvements, or adding density to existing parcels, making investments that promote industries and businesses and their ability to trade, hire more workers, or develop or adopt new technologies. And there are also ways that we can promote or improve enhancing our lived experience and quality of life, helping our citizens feel well, safe, and productive. So you may engage in one or more of these fields more than others, but economic development is really measured and achieved by success in all of them. And the field of economic development really emerged out of the long history of our cities and the place that they have at the nexus of transportation, mixed land uses, and commerce that goes all the way back to when cities started as port towns, or the market environments around railroad stops. They were designed around these commercial assets, whether it's a commodity or some kind of other transportation system. But they were also developed as centers or concentrations of cultural and civic assets and spaces for social gathering. And we had housing woven into these town environments all the way out to the farms and all the routes in between. Because these early towns and cities emerged before the car, we can see how compact they were and how other forms of transportation were tightly connected in these environments. And those land uses were often mixed. These were real hives of activity. Houston was one such city when it was founded, Houston and Galveston and several of the other communities that emerged in the 1840s to 1850s when our state started early settlement. For many years, that original gridded survey of the city really adapted well to investments in the port and ship channel, and alongside new waves of innovation in the transportation system, such as trolley cars and steamboats. After the hurricane of 1900, oil was discovered at Spindletap and other areas, and Houston became the center of the oil boom, which was then intimately tied to the growth of the automobile. But the true transformation of our metros across the country really happened in the post-war period, manufacturing boom, and the growth of the US highway infrastructure. This is where we saw industries grow outward, and their facilities were distributed across the country. Whole supply chains emerged and value chains that were spread out across whole highway systems in multiple states. This was the period that really birthed the profession of economic developers and those specializing in that connection between public assets and private investments. For this and a number of other social reasons and policy decisions, urban centers lost their primacy as the sort of center for all hubs of jobs, population, and innovation. But with the rise of modern computers, financial innovations, and global trade, the last 40 years or so have seen that slow and steady resurgence of the central business district and other centralized hubs of economic activity in and around our region. So today at the regional level, we arrive at a set of organic processes that start with this sort of backbone of infrastructure, like older cities that were built around roads, bridges, ports, and rail, and air traffic, and even the flooding infrastructure, which is vital for keeping those assets protected. They support a set of target industries or primary employers, which are sort of euphemisms for the types of activity that creates value outside of which the local population can't consume, so it gets traded, and value is generated outside the regional population. The primary fuel for those industries is our workforce, and they need a skilled and trained workforce as the competitive marketplaces that they exist in. And so there's a really important value process and value generation process between our workforce and our employers. And then we also need that stable backbone of infrastructure that supports our workforce and all of the housing, retail, recreational settings, healthcare, and arts and culture that help them feel safe, well, connected to society, and able to support and be supported by their families. So you may have a community that really lies in different levels of concentration of these different assets, but they're all part of one functioning system. It's a bunch of organic processes that don't just rely on one central hub anymore. There are multiple hubs. And what I really like about this sort of origin and destination map and this is really just of the last few years, there are many population centers throughout our region. But what we see is that jobs have moved basically out of the 610 loop and have become more distributed. But we see the population centers are really intertwined with that outward expansion, and it follows more of a lattice or a set of hubs and spokes and a network of places that are generating different types of activity. So people tend to stay within that 15 to 40-minute drive or commute time from their place of work. And this shows that people want to still have some balance between living and working and all of the things that they need along the way throughout the day. They have essentially 18 hours of life that they live, interactions and transactions that take place within and between these points of origin and destination. So reducing the amount of time between those points, not just because long commutes are not very enjoyable, but because we have a collective social interest in offering our economies and populations more and better quality time together, that our Main Street and market corridors and activity centers are really designed for doing that well. They're often the hub of our community's cultural roots and hold the trust of all of our social and cultural capital. We have a lot of infrastructure invested in these tightly knit, walkable live, work, play hubs. And so they play a vital role in the fiscal landscape of our cities and the ROI of our public investments, one that we made long ago and ones that we continue to make. And importantly, we've learned how much these place-based factors matter in the knowledge economy in the 21st century economy. As much as tech has changed the workplace, it was really through adaptation of urban design principles that were the precursors to co-work spaces and companies like WeWork's mix of a public house meets coffee shop vibe, or Google's ping pong tables. Live, work, play environments organically offer spaces for diverse people to commingle their ideas and organically innovate. So our Main Street contexts are the nucleus for the knowledge economy, and they're critically important to its success, as are the spaces where our workers and residents are inspired and develop into whole human beings. So livable centers are built on those same principles. They promote alternatives to being in our cars. They provide walkable, safe spaces for multiple generations. They promote intentionally increasing the diversity of experiences in around a destination through mixing uses and mixing types of interactions. And all of this adds up to us wanting to be out of our car, engaging with those around us, and experiencing and contributing to unique, inviting hubs of activity. So this is why we thought this toolbox would really be an important tool to represent in our Bringing Back Main Street roundtables, because it ties so closely to Main Street planning, downtown, town center planning, and other mixed use contexts. And what's interesting about the studies is that they were conducted in diverse environments. They have a mix of areas. Some are very small as 26 acres and up to as much as 12,000. And so they represent less than 2% of the land in our metropolitan planning organization. And they also range in concentrations of population. Some are more residential and some have higher rates of jobs than the surrounding city. But they all are coming at this from the perspective that mixing uses and creating that sort of 18-hour hub of activity to reduce our trip generation and have more concentrated, but also qualitatively better experiences throughout our day. That's the same driving principles. What was also interesting as we studied this is there, as we mentioned, or as I showed in the map of destinations and origins, is that our city is growing, but it's not in evenly spaced concentric rings. It really follows concentrations of existing infrastructure. And these are communities that are at different stages of growth. Some are really planning for growth that's coming 5 to 10 years down the line, and they want to decide now how they want to experience that growth and where they want it to go. Some are experiencing a sort of mid-wave. They're growing, 1, 5, 10% annually in this particular area, and they want to make sure to capitalize on that growth. Others are in a really competitive environment where land is expensive or they're running out of space, and they want to make sure to have that sort of highest and best use discussion about what they have left. And then others are sort of on the downside of a peak that happened maybe multiple decades ago, and they're still having to decide what to do with their resources, how to reposition those assets, and play a larger role in the development landscape directly in order to steer that growth or bring it back. And then some communities are experiencing different types of shocks, whether it's a flood or some other long-term structural issue related to their economy. So no matter what your experience of growth, what's important is planning and understanding what are the levers that you can pull. The tools don't really vary, but the applications might. And we put together the toolbox in terms of 3 primary categories, including policies and programs, which are the sort of black and white regulatory tools of governance. Incentive tools, which are ways of influencing the bottom line of development using different pots of money, or influencing the time scale that it takes to achieve success in development. And then there are capacity increase tools, or the kinds of partnerships that you can think of in order to have more leverage and achieve common goals together. And what's not in the toolbox directly, but that we're hoping that you incorporate as you approach the toolbox, is the importance of approaching the index, which is basically a dictionary or a reference guide, with some level of intention and purpose, which is, all of these studies that came before the recommendations involved these long discussions about the role of this particular space in the broader landscape of their development goals and how it reflects their community's values, whether they want to bring more shopping closer to home, whether they want to emphasize their cultural heritage or history, whether they want to focus on a fiscally minded approach and balance aging infrastructure versus outward expansion, whether they want to really emphasize that sort of entrepreneurial nature of their downtown or their main street environment or corridor, or whether they really need to offer more third spaces and just places for people to not be home or at work, generally speaking. So the policies and programs section, it focuses on, like I said, the sort of regulatory tools and programs that cities create. And within each of these tools, you'll find reference guides and additional resources, as well as examples of the applications of these tools, the physical code or the resolution or documentation of the program. They focus on getting folks out and about, getting buildings active or land invested in, creating more spaces for more activity and driving foot traffic to that activity. You can't make people spend more money, but you can set up an enabling environment where that secondary impact is the exchange of money or generation of value. And with a strategic mindset, you can really start to see how they fit together and can work in tandem. And you don't just have to pick one and only do that. They can really build on one another. So for instance, you can, take your multiple sites of vacancy and use pop-ups in the short term in order to drive interest in those spaces. And then the longer term play can be modifying codes that allow for permitting live work, so that your pop-up arts gallery can have that artist move in full time and sort of live in the back and have their space part of their domicile. And so you convert a temporary tactic into a long-term brick and mortar solution. And before you know it, that Thursday night sip and stroll has become an annual studio tour in a historic district that's now rebranded something funky like the Mill District or something like that. One example within the sort of blight and aesthetics category, we try to incorporate multiple examples in each one of them. So, each tool will have, 2 to 5 actual examples of this being applied either in a livable center or in another context. And wanted to call out that, a lot of communities have that sort of decision point of what's the difference between promoting street art versus graffiti. And the city of Detroit, for instance, really achieved that by, working with their landowners directly and having a registry program so that, business owners could have the support they needed in order to either maintain their art, have removal programs, but also to work collaboratively between them and the artist to use that space as a canvas. And so they achieve that level of like that organic funkiness that street art can have and that edginess of graffiti while still having things that were aesthetically pleasing. And the registry gave them a sort of head start in creating a whole marketing program and designing an attraction based on all of the different street art projects across their community. So they didn't have to drive it and invent the art. They used it as it was happening in the community and really just sort of captured that value creatively. So then the incentive tools is really designed around thinking about the development bottom line. So for example, expedited permitting can save a developer months of time. So you can sort of set up your code process or steer investment in a way, or work hand in hand more closely with developers in certain areas in order to expedite that process, which is as good as money when a site is sitting empty and the construction cycle is moving forward every day. There's also notes on different pots of money and various tools from our state's expansive local government code. There are other programs from the state and federal systems that allocate additional funds if the area meets certain needs-based criteria, such as environmental degradation, like a brownfield, or opportunity zones, which have experienced decades of underinvestment and could represent opportunities for entrepreneurship or revitalization. A lot of federal programs award extra points or weight allocation heavily towards opportunity zones. And there are a number of investment opportunities that make it a competitive option for the private sector as well. So again, depending on your organization's willingness to sort of proactively use these tools or promote them is particularly powerful if you approach these in tandem and think of it as a sort of capital stack or sets of funds to help an area develop over time. You can look at sites in your tax increment district and find a distressed property, or put up an existing publicly owned property for low cost, and even put out a public plan for what that property is intended to be and pre-entitle it already and get that squared away so that the developer can jump right in and you can generate a sort of circular loop of value capture and reinvestment in infrastructure or other properties in the district. You can attract investors in development or new business enterprises in certain state designated opportunity zone census tracts. So that's something that's more than just development. It's also a way to get your individual businesses some startup capital as well. So as another example, the state historic tax credits have been used really creatively for multiple activity generating projects, including this one in Nacogdoches. This is the Fredonia Hotel, which was an important hub of activity for Nacogdoches for many years, even though it closed for the final time under its previous ownership in 2013. But using the state historic tax credits, they were able to completely refurbish the facility in a mid-century modern vibe. And now it's used by the CVB as the area's premier convention center, which makes it a sort of anchor attraction that the entire downtown benefits from. It's only a block or two from a concentration of mixed uses, eateries, cafes, and galleries. The last sort of category of tools in the toolbox are partnerships. And these are people with who can sort of add capacity in terms of more minds or different pots of money and have a sort of mission that would be aligned with public investment or public-private investment. And it includes, management districts, which, you can have a city manage a TIF, or you can have a separate entity manage various district types. You can, 4A funds for economic development corporations seem pretty stringent at times because they're so focused on industrial, but there's interesting ways to use that to leverage, the modern wave of artisanal manufacturing, things like breweries and things like that. And there also are ways to leverage 4A funds in the same way that a 4B can operate, which we note in the toolbox. Nonprofit and institutional employers are also frequently referred to as anchor institutions, or if you have a hospital or basically a large employer in and around your area that you're planning, you can count on them having a large amount of capital assets, or at least a large number of people coming in every day, and really understanding what the needs are of that daytime population can be a starting point for making strategic investments to build on that. And so one sort of way to look at the management district capabilities and thinking about the role of these nonprofit or institutional employers, if we look at, in one of the examples in the toolbox is the East Downtown Management District, which is a TIF district that really positioned itself around what was a really long-term investment and the soccer stadium and the George R. Brown. And while those developments took time to sort of come to fruition, the leader of the management district worked a lot with the commercial and brokerage community to really put tenants that would that would boost the commercial activity in the area in existing buildings. So they took an adaptive reuse approach. They knew they couldn't invent new land in this really small environment next to a downtown. So they really helped to boost interest in existing properties and warehouses by putting things like live music venues or arts and culture facilities and breweries in and around there. And they leveraged their relationship to other institutions such as the George R. Brown and the Houston First Corporation, and all of the activities that tie into the central business district activities. They were able to leverage that for these more incremental investments. And so as you can see, they also, all of these different pots or categories in the toolbox can really tie into one another across categories as well. Let's say you want to bring in this more vital artisanal manufacturing environment. Well, there's definitely policies and programs to do that, as I mentioned, through pop-ups, through destination events like craft beer events or tastings, special zones where you can alter the zoning environment that really make and allow for things that would historically be considered heavy industry, but are really not anymore. And you can find new markets tax credits or use hotel taxes to support those events and drive activity in and around a specific zone. To drive that reinvestment and work with these partners and all of their different both social and private interests to support the particular businesses, enterprises, activities, and events that go on in and around this area. So there's, it's one of the next stages of this will be to sort of think through these scenarios and how they can be applied in tandem, because while we present a lot of examples from different communities, we tried to make sure to be really broad, but in some of these cities and districts and towns, they used more than one of these really well and effectively and strategically. So as this evolves, we'll be able to provide more of an interactive interface that gets you to think how you can tie these together in a roadmap and a sort of capital stack approach. So with that, I'll wrap it up and just let y'all know that right now, if you go to hgac.com/livable centers, you can find this little button right here, Economic Development Toolkit, and start engaging with it directly. We're going to be adding a print version of it so that you can sort of have it as a reference guide on your desk if you ever just want more ideas. But it will continue to be a living document that we build hand in hand with you. And I invite, if you see something in it that your community has done successfully, please let us know. And we would be happy to feature it as among the set of case studies that we present here. Or if there's a missing reference guide that you used heavily in your own approaches, please send it to us as well. So with that, I will let you all know that you can reach out to me anytime if you have an economic development related question, and my colleague Anita Holman, who is our principal planner for our Livable Centers program. So thank you all for your time and attention. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Jillian. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask those live now. You can use the raise your hand function, or of course, put any questions you have in the chat box.
One second. All right.
And I also see that Miss Ivory, your question has been answered in the chat box if you're looking for that.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. If you have any questions for Jillian, ask them in the chat box. Also, you have her contact information, so feel free to follow up after the presentation. There's a lot of really good information in the toolbox to digest.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, so the last thing we will do today is share some announcements. First, H-GAC's Parks and Natural Areas and Water Innovation Strategies of Excellence combined award ceremony will be on Friday, February 5th at 9 a.m. And you can find more information and register at hgac.com/parks. And then also in February, H-GAC will release a call for study sponsors for their next cycle of Livable Centers studies. And you can find more information about that at hgac.com/livable-centers. the same website as the Economic Development Toolbox. And we can also open it up right now if anyone else would like to make an announcement to the group. You can use the raise your hand function, or I suppose put your announcement in the chat box. All right. Hearing none, I will thank everyone for participating in today's roundtable. Thank you especially to H-GA staff who worked to put this event together and make sure it ran as smoothly as possible today. So thank you, Wendy Elmanzon, Cheryl Murgo, and Andrea Tantillo. And then also thank you to our presenters, Crystal Ortegon, Leah Larkins, Melissa Landine, and Jillian Donato. And all of their presentations will be available online. We'll send a follow-up email with that link, and we'll also include a survey for any feedback you might have. Andrea has also posted the link to that survey in the chat box, so we'd appreciate that if you could fill it out with any feedback. And thank you all again, and have a great day.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you.